So, good evening. So, we will begin our meditation period. This is the Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. It is Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. We'll have a half hour of silent meditation. I'll do a little bit of guiding in, after which we'll practice in silence until the bell rings. So, finding a comfortable posture. Bringing your attention to the body. Remembering that there is a body associated with this consciousness. Feeling any sensations that make themselves available to you. Maybe it's the temperature in the room. Maybe it's the weight of the body resting on the buttocks or the feet, the weight of the legs resting on the feet on the floor. Just coming into this present moment. Being right here, right now. If you can identify any tension that you're holding in the body, sometimes it's in the forehead, around the eyes, the mouth, sometimes in the hands, shoulders, just allowing that tension to drain out with each out breath. And then narrowing that body awareness down just to the experience of the breath. What we're looking for there is the felt experience of the breath, not the idea of a breath, not what we learned in school about how breathing operates. We're looking for tactile sensations. We're always breathing in or breathing out, or we're in that moment of turning from one to the other. So that's a great awareness. At what point in the process is my breath right now? And when you notice that the mind has wandered, has left the breath, you don't have to tell a story about it. You don't have to judge your abilities as a meditator. None of that. Just drop whatever mental activity is underway and return to the breath. So again, welcome to the Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. Just to make sure, I got one person who chatted in a message that they could not hear. If you can hear me, would you just raise your hand so I can see your hand? Okay, looks like a lot of hands up. Great. Let me say that this is our first time using Zoom. It probably will be imperfect, but we think Zoom is going to be a better platform long term. It's going to give us more features, and so we won't try to use all the features tonight. We'll add features gradually as we go. But I do want to make a couple of points. One is everyone is muted. I have muted everyone. And so tonight, there's no opportunity for anybody to speak. Another thing is that we are recording, but in case anybody's concerned about your image being recorded and then published, the only thing that will be recorded is me as the speaker, even though you might see other people on your screen, that will not be recorded. I want to make sure everybody, this is not going to be a long Zoom lesson. There's only one thing I really want to make sure everybody knows how to do. I have a laptop, and for me, it's in the upper right-hand corner. And it's a way to toggle between two things, gallery view and speaker view. And I want you to just try that right now. I think on iPads, maybe you have to touch the screen and then it shows up somewhere. But I just want you to go back and forth between those two and see how they differ. One is just the speaker view, and one is the gallery of all the people who are here tonight. I'm showing there are 55 people here. On my screen, I have 25 people, and then there's a arrow on the right-hand side where I can page over and see the next page of 25 people. So since we can't tonight, like we would in person, greet each other, why don't we just take a moment and look at the faces of our Sangha members, just page through the gallery and see who's here with us tonight. Yeah, this is delightful. One more comment, and then I'm going to go into my talk. There is at the bottom of your screen, again, you may have to touch the screen or move the cursor to the mouse to make it pop up, but there's a chat box across the bottom on mine. And if you choose that, you can chat in a question for the question and answer period. It'll show up. It'll be visible to everybody. Whatever you type there will be visible to everybody. Okay. So again, my name is Ward Simmons. I'm one of 5 Dharma leaders that rotate responsibility for leading on Wednesday nights. Tonight, the topic that I want to talk about is a teaching of the Buddhas that's known as the divine messengers. So when I first heard that the Buddha gave a teaching on the divine messengers, I was really excited. I thought, well, what are these divine messengers and what are the happy messages that they're going to bring me? But as the teacher started his talk, I quickly realized that I was not getting what I expected to get. The messengers are old age, illness, and death. Bummer. So as I was preparing this talk, I looked up the word divine, and among the definitions were supremely good and superb. And then I thought, well, I wonder what the antonyms are, the opposites of divine. And here's what I found: atrocious, awful, lousy, pathetic, rotten, terrible, vile, and wretched. Now we're talking. That sounds more like the view most of us have of old age, illness, and death. So why didn't the Buddha refer to this teaching as the atrocious, awful, lousy, pathetic, rotten, terrible, vile, wretched messengers? How could he have gotten that so wrong? Or did he? Maybe our understanding is incomplete in some important way. Maybe these conditions seem rotten and pathetic, but in fact, they are supremely good and superb. So this evening, I want to focus on 3 points that might help us understand this seeming contradiction. So the first point is renunciation, or another word that we could use there is acceptance. So has anybody besides me noticed that the mind is inclined to want what it doesn't have and to not want what it does have? Anybody bump into that? So the Buddha taught that this tendency toward craving, toward attachment, is the fundamental cause of human unhappiness and suffering. In an essay entitled "I'm Getting Old," Theravadan monk Ajahn Sumedho is discussing his tendency, this tendency of the mind, and the possibility that we can be free from this tendency. And here's what he says: this is where mindfulness allows us to receive the conditioned realities of the present with non-attachment. They are like this. The suffering is not wanting them to be like this. Not wanting to get old, not wanting physical discomfort, wanting to be young again, wanting to be healthy, wanting to be vigorous. That's the suffering we create. That's the unbearable misery of human ignorance, always wanting something you don't have or not wanting what you do have. So the suffering is not the conditions, old age, illness, and death. The suffering is our resistance to them and our wanting them to be different. So Philip Moffat often refers to this as the mind's tendency to demand things be other than the way they are. And, our probability for success when we demand things be other than the way they are isn't very good. So when we practice with the divine messengers, we see up close and personal this tendency of the mind. And it can be discouraging. Maybe sometimes we think, well, if I were just a better practitioner, I could overcome this tendency. So it's important for us to remember that there's nothing personal here. It's not that we're bad people. It's not that we're bad meditators. This is a natural tendency of the untrained mind. And as we train our minds, this tendency will begin to recede. I'm not going to promise that we can have a complete and permanent elimination of this kind of craving. What we can achieve, though, is a reduction in this craving. And when we reduce the craving, we reduce our suffering. And That sounds pretty good to me. I'll take that. I don't have to have it 100%. I'll take whatever steps I can get in that direction. So just to clarify one point, nobody's saying that we should not care whether our bodies are healthy or not. The message is not that good health is unimportant. It is important. It's wise to maintain the best health that we can. But from the moment of birth, the trajectory of this human body is clear. It is not reliable. At some point, it will become old, it will get sick, and it will die. We are practicing with the truth of how this human body changes over time and our ability to accept the progression, not to resist it. So just to summarize, when we look at the divine messengers through this lens of renunciation or acceptance, we are, one, observing how we react to the conditions that we don't prefer, and two, we're training ourselves to let go of our strong preferences for youth and health and, yes, for life. So a second benefit of practicing with the divine messengers is awareness of what is favorable in our present circumstances. I'm going to refer to this as wise reflection or gratitude. So no matter what our age, if we just look at aging, we can apply this practice and nurture an awareness and an appreciation for the years we have left, whatever those years are. If we're young and we nurture this awareness, we get the benefit of that for decades and decades. And if we're not so young, we still get the benefit for every moment left in our lives. And that's something that we so often take for granted, just to appreciate that we have many moments, months, years, decades ahead of us. As to health, we can nurture an awareness of the good health we have rather than focus on what's going wrong. So that's a natural tendency of the mind to focus on what's going wrong. It's nothing personal. We're not bad people. It's the way the untrained mind works. And it can be changed as we train our minds. And this is a practice that can help us in that training. So for me, it might be easy for me to dwell on the fact that I have this chronic low back pain. And I might fail to recognize that generally for 65 years old, my body's working pretty well. And finally, as to death, what we can do is we can use wise reflection or gratitude to focus on an ongoing appreciation that we are alive. Won't be true forever. And we see this when we're in the presence of someone who's dying. We see how precious life is and how easy it is for us to not appreciate that as the weeks dwindle into days and the days dwindle into hours. This awareness becomes quite keen. Sometimes we'll think, if we had only used our time together better, if only we had paid more attention when we had time together. This practice allows us to do that now so that we don't have to have those kinds of regrets at the end of life. Now, the third and final point I want to make about practicing with the divine messengers in addition to renunciation or acceptance and wise reflection or gratitude, we can view the divine messengers through the perspective of what I'm going to call deliverance or an opportunity. Most often we hear about 3 divine messengers, and the Buddha did teach that sometimes. But at other times, there are other versions presented. So the first time that we bump into the divine messengers in the Buddha's life is when he was 29 years old. He was living at home with his parents and his wife and his infant son, and he lived a life of great luxury. And I'm going to just read several sentences from an account of his life at that time. These are from Theravadan monk Bhikkhu Bodhi. So just sit back and kind of listen to a story for a couple of moments. The traditional legend of the Buddha's quest for enlightenment tells us that throughout his youth and early manhood, Prince Siddhartha, the Bodhisattva, lived in complete ignorance of the most elementary facts of human life. His father, anxious to protect his sensitive son from exposure to suffering, kept him an unwitting captive of ignorance. Incarcerated in the splendor of his palace, amply supplied with sensual pleasures and surrounded by merry friends, the prince did not entertain even the faintest suspicion that life could offer anything other than an endless succession of amusements and festivities. It was only on that fateful day in his 29th year when curiosity led him out beyond the palace walls that he encountered the 4 divine messengers that were to change his destiny. The first 3 were the old man, the sick man, and the corpse, which taught him the shocking truths of old age, illness, and death. The 4th was a wandering ascetic who revealed to him the existence of a path whereby all suffering can be fully transcended. So his first encounter showed him not only the 3 challenging messengers, but an uplifting, inspiring 4th one. In this story, the wandering ascetic represents the promise of choosing a spiritual quest over the pursuit of material possessions and sensory experience. Now, this particular ascetic, just to clarify, he was not following the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path because the Buddha had not yet identified that path. But he was one of many wandering ascetics in India at that time, and what his quest pointed the Buddha to was a life that would allow him to identify this Eightfold Path eventually. So when we undertake this quest, this 4th messenger, it supports us as we engage with the other 3. We develop the ability to detach from objects of desire, to renounce our demands and accept things as they are. And that was the first point earlier. This quest, this path, also nurtures in us wise reflection or gratitude, so we can appreciate each moment of our remaining years, our available good health, and our remaining life. The second point discussed earlier. And with respect to the third point, this path to liberation, this is our practice as insight meditation practitioners. Diligent study and practice will produce the payoff we seek. They enable us to utilize the inevitable human experience of aging, illness, and death as a means to progress on the path. So I will close with one more brief quote from Bhikkhu Bodhi. The divine messengers point to what lies beyond the transient, to a dimension of reality where there is no more aging, no more sickness, and no more death. This is the goal and the final the final destination of the Buddhist path. Nibbana, the unaging, the unailing the deathless. It is to direct us there that the divine messengers have appeared in our midst, and the good news of deliverance is their message. So, offer this for your consideration. So we do have a few minutes for some questions, if we can survive trying to chat in questions. Again, it should be the case that across the bottom of your screen, there is a menu, or maybe you have to move the mouse or touch your screen to get that to pop up. And there's a box that says chat. And if you click on that, a little strip will open on the side of your screen. And you can go to for me, the bottom, and type in a message. So we will see if any questions appear, and if they do not, that's okay too. We know how to sit quietly. We're meditators. Just a matter of information, someone has chatted in that on their iPhone, not their iPad, but their iPhone, gallery view is not available. I'm imagining that's because an iPhone has, a relatively small screen. So if you had a lot of thumbnails, they wouldn't be usable. So here's a question. Let me just give this a moment of thought. So the question, this is from Ben, and the question is, how do we deal with fear? So when we practice in this way, insight meditation, the practice is to know what's true in each moment and to see clearly what's happening. One way that we can easily respond to fear is by covering it over, by running away from it, not seeing it. Now, sometimes if the fear is intense, maybe that's the right way to deal with it. Sometimes we can be overwhelmed, and so it can be more than we can manage. But unless we're overwhelmed, the best way to deal with fear, I would say, is to know what's true in the moment, to open to the fear as much as we are able without getting overwhelmed. Often, I think we find that the fear is not, there's not as much to be afraid of as we think there is. And so if we can dip our toe in and begin to make friends with the fear, open to it, experience it, we can maybe take away a little bit of the charge. Sometimes fear is present for good reason. If we're on a dark street and it's a rough neighborhood and we hear some scary stuff going on behind us, that fear can be very useful. Maybe we need to run as fast as we can to get out of there. So not all fear is problematic. Sometimes it's information we need. But I think in the context of fear around the divine messengers, my suggestion would be to examine the fear, open to the fear, and see what's underneath it. See if maybe it's not as fearful as it seems. So you can try that and see if that helps. Okay. So this is from Denise Owens. She says, I realize now that I should have been more grateful when the staff at Trader Joe's asked if I meant to be in the 60-plus-year-old line. I'm grateful to see everyone tonight. Yeah, that whole 60 and over special shopping thing, I'm taking advantage of it, but it feels a little awkward. I don't know why. I don't know. I feel like maybe I should be leaving it for other people that need it more. But anyway, I'm taking advantage of it, and it's an awfully kind thing that stores are doing to let people who are either older or disabled shop at special times. So here's a question. How do you actually work with these messages? This is from Gail. Gail, go for it. I think the long-term goal is to not see them as negatives, but see them as simply what's true. How do we get from here to there, I think is what I'm hearing, Gail, your question is. And I think paying attention to our reactions to these messengers, old age, illness, and death, watching carefully and trying to understand, is this reaction serving me? When I resist old age, is that doing me any good? Is it going to stop me from aging? No. So it's really resistance, seeing clearly that it's resistance to what is going to be true no matter what. And when we see that we're resisting what's true, gradually over time, that resistance starts to melt away. Not all at once, but so keeping it at the forefront, I think, is kind of the short answer. One way some people do this, there is a practice people use called the 5 daily reflections, where maybe every morning before or after meditation, one reflects on these 5 things, 3 of which are old age, illness, and death. And I may be wrong, but I think the 5 daily reflections are on the IMC Charlotte website under reference material. If they're not, we'll try to get them up there. So that's one way we can just keep it in the forefront. Here's a message from Debbie George. It looks like some folks don't know they can be seen. Perhaps they've turned their own video off, but they don't know they can still be seen. Looks like some folks don't know they can be seen. So maybe somebody's doing something that we're presuming they wouldn't do if they knew they were being seen. So I guess the message is, be careful what you're doing if your little light on your camera is lit up, because you might be being observed. Okay, that feels like a good stopping point for the question and answer period. We will move on to announcements. So this summer, we're going to do the same thing that we did last summer, which is we're going to have a series called Sutta Summer, and it'll be 5 Wednesday nights, May 27th through June 24th, when the Dharma leader will speak on a sutta of their choosing. And so it'll be a little more oriented. By the end of the 5 weeks, hopefully, it'll give you a chance to feel a little more familiarity with suttas. Sometimes our talks are very much based in the suttas and sometimes less so, but this will be an opportunity to delve into that. There is a Beyond the Basics series that's going to begin on May 5th. It'll be 4 consecutive second Tuesdays, so every 2 weeks. I'm teaching that. You'll never guess what the topic is. It's the divine messengers. And I think there are 2 or 3 slots still left. So if you want to register for that, you can do that. I think the website has instructions. On the 13th of May, we will have a guest leader, Larry DeWalt, one of our Sangha members, who's also in the Dharma Leader Training Program. So he'll be our guest leader that evening, and I know we'll all want to be tuned in for that. 2 things that you may have on your calendar that have been canceled are the annual Sangha picnic on May 24th and Mark Nunberg on May 15th and 16th. So if they're on your calendars, you should take them off. Because things are changing rapidly now, be sure to keep your eye on the website, imccharlotte.org, for changes and events coming and going. Normally, if we were meeting in person, the last announcement would be there's a Dana box in the back of the room. But of course, there's not a Dana box in the back of the room. There is the ability to donate online. And so if you would like to support this community financially, you can go to the website and donate in that way. Okay, so we will close. Sorry about that. I think we just got bombed. So we will close with our loving kindness or metta meditation. And I'll offer some phrases and then you can repeat them silently to yourself. So just finding a comfortable posture, closing your eyes. Let's take a moment to just say either silently to yourself or out loud the names of any beings that you would like to have held in loving kindness tonight. And I'm going to take just a moment, a little personal privilege to name someone. And I want to dedicate this evening's talk to this person who has now experienced all 3 of the divine messengers. He lived to age 73. I think that qualifies him to have some experience with old age. He survived both lung cancer and throat cancer, so he knew a little bit about illness. And a week ago yesterday, he experienced the third messenger, death, sadly, from COVID-19. John Prine was a singer and a songwriter. I bought his first album in 1971 while I was still in high school, and his words spoke to me, his wisdom and his humor. A year ago was the last time Gail and I saw him on New Year's Eve at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. So I'd like to put his name in as we practice metta tonight. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I be happy and content. May I be healthy in body and mind. And may I live a life of well-being, free from suffering. And bringing to mind a being or beings that you'd like to have held in loving kindness tonight. We'll include here all the names that everyone spoke earlier. May you be safe from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and content. May you be healthy in body and mind. And may you live a life of well-being, free from suffering. And finally, broadening our loving kindness, our metta practice out to all beings everywhere. May all beings be safe from inner and outer harm. May all beings be happy and content. May all beings be healthy in body and mind. And may all beings, without exception, live lives of well-being, free from suffering. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.